Welcome all to this special webinar event in collaboration with Pendulum and Fullscript. I'm Amy Regan from Fullscript, and I'm so glad that you joined us today. A few housekeeping notes. Please place all questions you have in the Q&A box for a chance for them to be answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be sent via email to all attendees and registrants, as well as available to watch on demand at fullscript.com/webinars. There is a copy of the presentation slides in the handout section. It is my pleasure to announce Colleen Cutcliffe and also Dr. Jeff Glad to be our speakers today. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Amy. Colleen, it's great to be with you again.
Thank you. Always excited to get a chance to do Fullscript Pendulum duo with you, Jeff. So thanks for the chance.
Yeah, absolutely. So quick disclaimer, everybody, presentation solely for education of healthcare providers. We're not here to provide medical or professional advice in any way. And really want to focus this talk. There's going to be a lot of clinical discussion, but we are really excited about research and outcomes. And I know, Colleen and Pendulum are fully aligned with this, but, certainly Fullscript, our focus is we want whole person care to become the standard in healthcare. And to do that requires having outcomes and proof of the things you do. So this webinar is a very exciting, sort of first for us, which is doing an outcome study and a survey with a partner of ours. One that's, richly steeped in science and the data, which Colleen's going to talk about. So as an overview, we'll kind of walk through how Fullscript and Pendulum are advancing the supplement industry through our ongoing commitment to clinical research and a strong clinical partnership. Colleen's going to spend time exploring and discussing the role of Akkermansia muciniphila in human health, helping provide some insights into its mechanism of action and some of the proof points that they've been able to see in the studies they've done. And then we'll talk about the collaborative work that we did in the results of the Akkermansia 500 million AFU practitioner survey and how that may help you as a clinician provide care to your patients and what that means. I was reviewing all of the survey details and thinking, when I still, and certainly when I was early on in my learning, you run to the stage right after the talk and you ask the speaker, what are you using for this, and what products are you using? And that happens to me now when I get off stage. Colleen, I'm sure that happens to you. Here's 82 practitioners giving you what they're using and what they're seeing. So a really powerful statement with the results of the survey that was done. So I want to talk a little bit about Fullscript and some of the proof points that we've come up with behind our platform, and our commitment, to clinical outcomes really picked up last year. And this year we're able to really share some exciting outcomes. Prior to that, we had done some work that we'll talk about as well. But why is it important? Why do we focus on that? Ultimately, we want to provide evidence-based insights to our practitioners who use our platform that demonstrate the effectiveness of the platform itself, whether that's workflow efficiency, which is a big deal, right? More technologies in practitioners' offices often mean more clicks, more time, more headaches. How do we optimize for the practitioner to create and deliver those treatment plans? The products that we have and the high quality there is always a value prop that we've been passionate about, but now we're focused on what are the outcomes of these products, and then the services that enhance the patient outcomes. So the adherence and the engagement work that we've done and the tooling that we've built to be able to do that. We also want to understand and anticipate the needs, being able to collect insights from practitioners, from brand partners, to deepen our understanding of the current and the future healthcare provider and patient needs. And then, as I mentioned early on, we want to champion whole person care. We want to lead the way in establishing what those best practices and standards are to be able to deliver excellent care to the patients. And quite frankly, this is what patients are demanding, is this type of care. We have 4 research pillars that we focus on when we talk about outcomes and build a plan for what we've done already, but what's coming down the pipe. Patient health outcomes and engagement. So what is the impact on health, on patients, whether that's promise scoring, whether that's biomarker tracking, also impact on patient adherence and engagement, as I mentioned, use of the health service, satisfaction with the care, both the care that the platform provides, but ultimately the care the provider is giving. We, as I mentioned, provider efficiency and workflow. So are we helping that practitioner deliver these excellent clinical-based plans with as few clicks as possible? Are we helping facilitate them in the decision-making process? What is the value to the healthcare system, right? So much talk about value-based care, and how can Fullscript play a role in bending, bending that cost curve through the use of health services, through lowering hospitalizations, lowering fractures, improving the quality of life of the patients and the practitioners, quite frankly. And what is the impact on the overall cost of chronic disease reduction and the value of delivering whole person care? And then focus and work with our brand partners on products and ingredient studies. So what is the impact of these ingredients in whole person and protocols, quite frankly, not just individual, but packaged together. We'll talk about some of those protocols that have been put together for you to deliver to those patients, have some outcomes to support that delivery. Our past project, as I mentioned, so back in 2020, we did an entire treatment adherence report on, what are practitioners doing that leads to the best adherence by the patients to their plans. We did a big paper on behavioral change, and then a literature review on patient literacy in integrative medicine. The two that we released this year, one was with the Texas Center for Lifestyle Medicine that showed a significant increase in patient engagement with the practice for those that received a Fullscript treatment plan versus those that did not. Also increased engagement with the practice for those that made an order on the Fullscript platform versus those that didn't. We also did a biomarker tracking and showed that patients who purchased their supplements through their Fullscript treatment plan improved several biomarkers based on the reference range, anywhere between 22 and 45%. And the patients that did not order their treatment plan all got worse in those biomarkers. We then did a provider efficiency survey showing that over 70% of new practitioners using Fullscript said it significantly improved their efficiency. The mid 40% of new practitioners using Fullscript in the first 6 months said they save 1 to 3 hours a week in treatment planning by using the platform. And then we're going to talk at the end about the Pendulum provider efficacy survey, which we took insights about the high dose live Akkermansia muciniphila and the factors that influence the clinical decision making from over 80 practitioners. Colleen, you are up.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And I just want to reiterate how appreciative I am for the work that Fullscript is doing and the investment that you guys are making in really understanding how do these products work. And also a big thank you to the healthcare provider community for being so engaged in this. And a lot of what we're driving towards here is how do we learn more about what's best for the patient? And the practitioners who are really doing this in real life are such an important unlock for the rest of us to know, are the products really working and how can we continue to improve them? And I think in particular, the ingredients and the strains that Pendulum is bringing to market really do require some investment in clinical research, because it's not a recycling of ingredients that have been around for a long time and studied globally. We're really bringing these next generation strains. And so with that comes the opportunity, but also the responsibility, I think, to run studies like what we did here together with Fullscript. So in terms of how we think about advancing probiotic innovation through science, it's really about identifying these breakthrough strains, developing precision formulas that have an underlying mechanism of action that is linked to disease state, and then validating the efficacy through studies like the one that we're going to share out with you guys today. So the first thing to note about next generation probiotic strains is that when we talk about the gut microbiome and where all the action is, it's really here in the distal colon. So you think about the stomach as being, kind of the first entry point for your food, makes its way through the entire intestine to the distal area here, the distal colon. And that's where all of these strains are that we're going to talk about today. And some of these strains are what we call strict anaerobes. And that means that by the time you get down to the distal colon, there's actually no oxygen here. And these strains, they can't grow in the presence of any oxygen. And so they actually have this feature about them that is different from all the other strains that you find on the market today, in that they are strict anaerobes. They can't survive in the presence of oxygen. Furthermore, at Pendulum, we've been really interested in how do you actually measure what's in your pill and what you're actually growing? One of the most traditional ways that all of us are familiar with is measuring colony-forming units, so CFUs. And this is, if we all remember back to 7th grade biology, this is where you plate stuff out on a petri dish and then you literally count how many colonies form, and that tells you your CFU count. The downside to CFU counts is, number one, the media that you decide to use in your petri dish can make a huge difference in your CFU counts, like log order difference in your CFU counts. And so because the petri dish is sort of an artificial environment, it's hard to know which media you should use that would actually be representative of what would be happening in your gut. And the second downside to this is you only get to see what in your pill is actually forming colonies without getting a full idea of everything that's in that pill. So what we've been using is flow cytometry to get at active fluorescent units. And the output you see on the left-hand side here is an example of what you get from a single flow cytometry run. Each of the dots here, if you can see them, actually is the equivalent of a colony on these plates. And so first of all, you can see you get a ton of data. Moreover, you get to see your live cells, the green cells, which would correspond to colony-forming units, but you also get to see your dead cells in red, as well as your kind of in-between cells that are sort of half dead, half alive. And so now in every pill, you know exactly what's in there, what's alive, what's dead, what's partially dead, and not just what is able to form colonies. And the precision of this technology of flow cytometry is really important when you're delivering on an outcome-based product where you need every pill to deliver the exact same efficacy. And so just to show you a little bit of the mad scientist happening underneath the hood here, when it comes to developing these anaerobic strains, there are actually very specific equipment that you have to invest in. And so on the left-hand side here, you can see an anaerobic chamber where everything that's happening in that chamber is completely oxygen-free. And then even on our dev side, when we're first looking at these strains, all of these wires, everything here is intended to keep a very closed system where you can measure everything that's happening during growth and cultivation, but you're keeping everything close so that no oxygen enters the system. And so really these next generation strains have also required innovation on the manufacturing side. And so ultimately, of course, it matters what are these strains doing in humans. And so I'm going to share with you guys today a clinical trial that was published in BMJ, which is a placebo-controlled, double-blinded, randomized trial in people with type 2 diabetes. And there are 3 arms in this study. One is the placebo. One is a 3-strain formulation called WBF10. And the third is a 5-strain formulation called WBF11. And these are formulations of strains which were designed to help people with type 2 diabetes lower their A1C as well as their blood glucose spikes. It was a pilot study across 76 subjects at 6 different study sites in the United States. And the key outcomes that we were measuring were first, safety and tolerability, because these are entirely new strains and new formulations being brought to the market. And then the second was the area under the curve of a meal tolerance test, so really understanding postprandial glucose spikes. The third was looking at HbA1c, and then we also looked at C-reactive protein. And so in this study, we measured all of these as well as microbiome changes that were happening to the patient. And the concept is that if you can modify people's microbiomes to enable them to stimulate their GLP-1 production, you could help them lower their A1C and blood glucose spikes. And we'll get more into the mechanism of action in future slides. But just to get to the punchline of the outcomes here, the 2 key outcomes are around A1C and area under the curve. And what you can see is that on the right-hand side here, the placebo is in gray, the 3-strain formulation is in blue, and the 5-strain formulation is in green. And you can see that compared to placebo, the 5-strain formulation was able to lower A1C by 0.6 and lower postprandial glucose spikes by 33%. And so this is a significant improvement in those 2 key parameters for people with type 2 diabetes. And this is the first and only time a microbiome intervention has ever been able to show actually improving A1C and blood glucose spikes in people with type 2 diabetes. And so we used PCR and DNA sequencing tests to really look at the appearance of those strains during those clinical trials. And I just wanted to showcase another study that we're doing right now, which is in collaboration with a company called BiomeSense. This was born out of Jack Gilbert's lab. Professor Gilbert is at UCSD. And this is a technology that you literally would have in your bathroom that is able to measure various strains, but specifically what they were interested in is working with us to measure Akkermansia muciniphila. So there might come a day where people can actually measure their own Akkermansia levels coming out of their stool after taking products. And so some of the upcoming clinical trials that we have going on, in addition to what we're going to share here that we did with Fullscript, we've been looking at a formulation which is specifically designed to lower food cravings through its stimulation of GLP-1 production. We are looking at a 5-strain probiotic therapy, which is designed for people with bipolar disorder and depressive symptoms. This is being done in collaboration with a third-party institute and being funded actually by the Milken Institute. And then we have a third study, which is being done also using a 5-strain probiotic formulation, looking in postmenopausal women and the impact of the microbiome on bone health. Again, this is being done as a clinical trial with a third party and external funding. And so really excited to continue to see the different areas that the microbiome can really impact human health beyond just type 2 diabetes. And so one of the key strains that is at the heart of the formulation for type 2 diabetes is Akkermansia muciniphila. This is really emerging as a keystone strain through all of the research and publications that have been happening both in the US and globally. And what you can see here is that over time, the number of publications has been increasing exponentially. But more importantly, every color in this stacked bar graph represents a different indication. And what you can see is that there is a growing number of indications that Akkermansia appears to play an important role in. And what we know about these studies is that they're really looking at the levels of live Akkermansia in people with these different disease states versus healthy, and starting to realize that Akkermansia is low in a really wide variety of health disorders. And so what's becoming clear is that Akkermansia is a keystone strain that plays an important role in gut barrier integrity as well as metabolic health. It lives in the mucosal layer, and it represents a pretty substantial amount of a healthy gut microbiome, somewhere between 1% and 4%. We also know that it's being called a keystone strain because low levels of Akkermansia are associated with such a wide variety of diseases, ranging from things like gut barrier issues to obesity to inflammation and even anxiety and depression and other neurological disorders. And the reason why Akkermansia plays such a keystone role and the hypothesis around why it's correlated, low amounts are correlated with those disease states, is because of its role in both gut barrier integrity and in stimulating GLP-1. So I know this is a super busy slide, but let me try to walk you through it. This is effectively what we know today, November 2024, about Akkermansia. You saw those exponentially increasing publications, so we expect there'll be more and more data coming out about it. But what we know now is that if you look at the bottom line here of what Akkermansia plays a role in, it's in immune homeostasis, gut barrier integrity, weight management, and blood glucose control. And if you dig into how Akkermansia is doing that, there are some key things we know about it. The first is that Akkermansia has a protein called AMUC 1100, which is on its surface. This protein is able to bind to the TLR2 receptors, which plays an important role in gut barrier integrity as well as immune homeostasis. We also know that Akkermansia is able to produce short-chain fatty acids, and specifically propionate, which is able to be converted into butyrate. And butyrate is a really well-known important small molecule that can bind to the G protein-coupled receptors, GPR41 and GPR44, in the L cells. And when butyrate binds to those receptors, it signals to release GLP-1 into the bloodstream. And so Akkermansia is a direct stimulator of GLP-1 through its production of propionate. And it is also a direct stimulator of GLP-1 through its production of P9. So P9 is a protein that Akkermansia secretes, it binds to the ICAM2 receptors, also on the L cells. And when P9 binds to the ICAM2 receptors, that stimulates the release of GLP-1. And GLP-1 plays a really important role in weight management as well as blood glucose control, as many people here are now quite familiar with the GLP-1 drugs that are out there, which are really designed to mimic the body's natural GLP-1 hormone. And so Akkermansia, additionally, is able to play a role in gut barrier integrity because it's actually the only known strain that can both consume mucin as well as stimulate the production of new mucin. And so through that, it plays this incredibly important fundamental role in regulating the mucin layer. And the mucin layer is incredibly important because it is what allows us to have tight junctions between the cells in our epithelial layer. And so as a result of all the roles that Akkermansia plays, we know that if you are low or have no Akkermansia, there are a bunch of different outcomes to this. The first is that blue part, that mucin layer. Because Akkermansia is not there to regulate the mucin layer, we know that when people are low in Akkermansia, they have a thinning mucin layer. And this results in a loss of tight junctions. And when you lose those tight junctions between these epithelial cells, you have this reduced gut barrier function. This shows up as increased intestinal inflammation, infiltration of pathogenic bacteria, all the GI issues and inflammation issues that show up for a patient. Then when you dig in deeper, you find that they're low in Akkermansia, and it's really related to this gut barrier work that it does. Additionally, when you don't have Akkermansia, you don't have the secretion of these small molecules, which can stimulate GLP-1 production. So you also find in people that are low in Akkermansia, all of the indications that are linked to an inability to manage weight and hunger and blood glucose control. Moreover, there's been research that has been happening around pasteurized Akkermansia to understand what benefits it can bring. And so just to really highlight the difference between live and pasteurized Akkermansia, pasteurized Akkermansia is when you take Akkermansia, you heat it up, you pasteurize it, and so it breaks open the cell wall of Akkermansia. And what happens in that is that all of the small molecules that are attached or inside Akkermansia can then be released. And so what you get from pasteurized Akkermansia is that's been shown is that you can still get some of the activity of AMUC 1100. But what you lose that you get with the live Akkermansia is you lose the ability for the pasteurized Akkermansia to be able to consume mucin and also produce new mucin. So you lose a little bit of that regulation that the live Akkermansia is able to impart. And then the other important thing about live Akkermansia is that because it's alive, it works in tandem with the food that you're eating and the nutrition and prebiotics that feed Akkermansia. And so if you are pairing nutrition with microbiome interventions, it's important to have live probiotic strains so that they can actually work together. And when you have pasteurized Akkermansia, because it's not able to grow, you kind of lose that nice connection between the nutrition and the microbiome working together. Additionally, this is just a data point on that AMUC 1100 protein. When it's pasteurized, it does lose some of its stability. So again, remembering back to maybe high school or college biology, when you heat up proteins, they start to unfold. And we know that when you pasteurize Akkermansia, that at least half of the AMUC 1100 protein is unfolded, so you don't get the full efficacy of that protein either. And then this is really just bringing home the fact that we know that if you want to help a patient stimulate their Akkermansia growth, you want them to be on a high fiber, high polyphenol diet. Both of those have been shown to really help people increase their Akkermansia levels. And so if you're supplementing with live Akkermansia and increasing fiber and polyphenols in the diet, you're going to get kind of this 1-2 punch of increasing Akkermansia levels. And then conversely, if you are increasing your fiber and polyphenols and supplementing with a pasteurized Akkermansia, you're not quite getting that nice synergy between the microbiome and the intervention and the prebiotics. And then lastly, this is actually the first time that we're sharing this out here on Fullscript. We recently had a publication come out, this peer-reviewed journal Toxicology Reports, demonstrating the safety of Akkermansia formulations in healthy individuals. And so this was a toxicity study, a really in-depth toxicity study at different levels of Akkermansia, really trying to dig into creating more data around the safety of Akkermansia. And of course, course, as we continue to learn more about this strain and different case studies where it's being used, we're going to learn more and more about its safety profile. But Pendulum is really interested in contributing to that body of knowledge. And one of the reasons that we invested in doing these studies and publishing this for everybody to be able to have as a resource.
Excellent. All right, so let's talk about the survey that we collaborated on. And again, like, the Akkermansia muciniphila has a heavy amount of research supporting its use in the conditions Colleen outlined. And really what we want to do here is let's ask our providers that are using this product what their results, what they're seeing from patients. And ultimately that, really wanted to gather those experiences and what are the perceptions of patient outcomes. So again, it'd be like showing up and talking to 82 different practitioners who are using Akkermansia 500 million AFUs in their patients, and what are they seeing? So this was a Qualtrics study. We reached out to 783 providers and asked them to complete a survey. We chose those providers from practitioners that were recommending Akkermansia 500 million on Fullscript within a treatment plan, or they had purchased that product to have in their clinic to then dispense to patients there. What we got were 82 practitioners that, and the results are here, I'll walk through them, but ultimately 98% of those practitioners will continue to recommend Akkermansia 500 million AFU to their patient, which is just incredible validation of what they're seeing, not just in the clinical success, but to Colleen's point in that study she released for the first time, the safety, right? So often you have patients who are intolerant to certain products or have, side effects to products. You tend to not use them as much. This is 98% of practitioners will still be making these recommendations to patients. 89% reported patients experience improvement to their health in general. 89% also experienced overall improvement in their digestive health. So improving that mucin layer and improving that gut integrity and improving the overall health of patients. 84% reported patients experienced an improvement in bowel health. So similar to sort of overall digestive health, specifically to the bowels, those patients saw improvement. 79% reported patients experience improvement in their overall quality of life. And not surprisingly, a little more than two-thirds reported seeing improvements in metabolic health. So incredibly exciting success of, the practitioners and their patients. 99% agreed that Pendulum is a science-backed brand. I wonder who that 1% was, given all the research that's there. But 99% also reported that it was well tolerated by their patient population. Again, almost 100% of practitioners seeing incredible tolerance of this high-dose Akkermansia muciniphila product. 98% of providers agree that Fullscript is a science-based backed brand, which again is something that we both have kind of staked our reputations on, making sure that we're continuing to drive these science-based outcomes. 94% will recommend Akkermansia 500 million AFU to other healthcare providers. 43% recommend Akkermansia 500 in combination with other probiotic strains. So that's a lower percentage. You're still seeing a lot of that success in the previous slide and this slide, generally with sort of single focused probiotic strain. And I think, as Colleen pointed out, it becomes really important to also talk to patients about changing the diet to further support the success of the probiotics they're taking and not, sort of work against what you're trying to do in a treatment plan. So applying the Akkermansia muciniphila 500 million AFU in clinical practice, a couple pearls here: supplement with the 500 for 3 to 6 months to really replenish those levels. And these are in patients that you suspect that they have low levels. That's usually sort of the clinical context, right? Is there metabolic concerns? Are there gut barrier concerns? Maybe you do microbiome testing routinely in your patients. You're actually seeing low levels of Akkermansia. You want to start with 3 to 6 months of the higher dose 500 million AFU product, and then transition them down to the 100 million AFU for ongoing maintenance and support of their overall health. If you have patients who have found, are having GI sensitivity, you certainly can go the other direction, start with the 100 million and really build up the tolerance get some of the success and some of the wins, and then as tolerated, move them up to that 500 million AFU product for 3 to 6 months, really improve those Akkermansia levels, and then again, transition them back to the 100. Fullscript, we're very proud of the protocols we have. We've worked together with Pendulum to build some protocols so that you can have easy access to these based on the patients you're seeing in the clinic. So there's protocols specifically for cardiometabolic health, for healthy blood sugar support, for intestinal barrier function support, overall general metabolic support, and then support and protocols to support directly GLP-1 production. If you use that QR code there, you'll be able to access those protocols in your Fullscript account. If you want to customize those for your own use in your patients, absolutely do so. Again, remember the importance of all of the other aspects of that patient's health. Feel free to pull in some of the resources that Fullscript has already written for you around diet, around mindfulness, around exercise, and really give that full script to the patient to give them the full experience of how to optimize their health. You can learn more about Akkermansia, muciniphila, and other novel probiotic strains. There's previous webinars. Amy already gave the website there, but Dr. Keller and I did one with Colleen about the novel probiotic strains addressing microbiome and overall metabolic health. And then Dr. Perlman and Christina have done how to use the Pendulum Pro line, which is also available directly on Fullscript to be able to build, take advantage of some of those protocols, but also build your own as you go through that content. Excellent. So thank you for your time. We certainly want to be able to answer any of the questions that have come in. So let me check here. All right, so I have one question, Colleen. On the study that's going to focus on bone health, that 5 probiotic strain, is that the same strain that was used in the A1C and CRP study, or is that a new list of 5 probiotic strains?
It's the same formulation that has been shown to increase short-chain fatty acid levels, as well as have all the benefits of Akkermansia, and potentially can also help with bone health. So it's the same formulation.
Yeah, excellent. Another question here is, you mentioned sort of as a category from a food perspective in optimizing that microbiome environment, polyphenols and fiber. Can you give specific foods of focus for these patients so practitioners can easily kind of give, you're going to head to the grocery store, let's load up on X, Y, and Z to really optimize that microbiome environment?
Absolutely. I think, just on the last question, just to be clear, that 5-strain formulation is accessible to everybody here through Fullscript. It's the Pendulum Glucose Control product. So just to make sure, if you want to get access to that, you can get that through Fullscript today. In terms of the foods that are going to help increase fibers and polyphenols, it's a great question. So for fibers, when people walk into the grocery store, think about the produce section and all those leafy greens. Those are all great sources of fiber. Among them, Jerusalem artichokes are some of the highest sources of fiber, but really any of those leafy greens are fantastic. Collard greens, kale, asparagus. And then if you then head to the bean section, the lentil section, lentils are also very high in fiber. And so any recipes that have both lentils and vegetables in them are really nailing it on fiber. And black beans are also really a fantastic source of fiber. On the polyphenols, again, going back to that produce section, when you think about the berry section, so your pomegranates, your raspberries, these are all great sources of polyphenols. Also, green tea, that is a wonderful source of polyphenols. And then red wine and dark chocolate.
Excellent. So given we're recording this in November, a great soup and stew recipe catalog would be ideal for the microbiome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dump all your veggies in there.
Perfect. Amy, did you have any other questions come in at all? Because I've gotten through my list here.
No, and I encourage anyone to send their questions right through. You guys have caught me drinking some green tea. Yes, please, anyone pop them right in the chat, and we can continue with your questions, Dr. Glad.
Yeah, perfect. I didn't have any others come in here. I'm curious though on the bone sport one. I mean, it makes complete sense to me given the connection between bone loss and inflammation. But I assume there are sort of other studies connecting the microbiome to bone health that leads to kind of wanting to go here, or this is going to be a first of its time study on microbiome and bone health.
Well, my understanding is that, and this is not my specialty, but my understanding is exactly what you said, which is that inflammation and even metabolic disorders have been shown to be linked to diminishing bone health. But then also there are some animal studies which have shown that you can improve bone health through the microbiome and specifically through Akkermansia, along with these other strains that work with it to increase short-chain fatty acid production. So I think this is a field of active study and really excited to see what happens in humans here.
Yeah, excellent. One more question came in. So should a person eat more fermented foods? Specifically, I think probably for Akkermansia. I think in general, fermented foods are absolutely, but curious if there's a connection between fermented foods as a supporter of Akkermansia.
Generally speaking, fermented foods will help increase your lactobacillus and bifidobacterium strains. That's what most of the studies have shown. If you're eating a fermented food that also happens to be high in fiber, so kimchi, sauerkraut, all of those will also, they're going to help boost your Akkermansia levels for sure. It's a good combo there.
Excellent. Amy, your call out is working. We're getting questions coming in now. So how would this support someone who's using a GLP-1 medication such as semaglutide?
Well, I think we actually have a separate set of data on how practitioners are using these probiotics alongside the GLP-1 drugs. But just to kind of add a little bit more color to how these two things work, one is that the microbiome and specifically the strains that are in this formulation that we talked about have been shown to be able to increase GLP-1 hormone production. That's your body's natural GLP-1 hormone. And the way that this works is that you eat food, your microbiome, your factory of trillions of microbes are helping to metabolize that food. And this one department of these strains stimulates GLP-1 production. And so your GLP-1 in your bloodstream goes up. And that is what stimulates your body to respond with insulin secretion to help you metabolize the glucose in the food you just ate, and also signals to your brain that you're full because you just ate food. And so then over time, your GLP-1 levels will go down, and then you'll get hungry and you'll eat again and they'll go back up. And so you're supposed to have this cyclical pattern of GLP-1 similar to your glucose levels. And so that is the natural GLP-1 hormone production that you get with these probiotic formulations here that target the microbiome. The GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy and semaglutide are chemical mimics of the GLP-1 hormone. And so you inject them and they're chemical mimics that have a long-lasting lifetime. And so effectively, you get these really high levels of GLP-1 and GLP-1 signaling that don't really go away. So you don't get that cycle. They're sort of at high levels consistently. And so you're constantly telling your body to metabolize the glucose as well as that you're not hungry anymore. And so people get this very immediate response of sometimes all the way to the point of nausea, but immediately they lose their hunger and they're metabolizing sugars. And so you start to get this very dramatic impact also to weight, which of course is the primary reason people get excited about those drugs who don't have diabetes. And so one of the downsides to those GLP-1 drugs, even though they're highly effective, one of the downsides is that I sort of liken it to if I were to speak to you through a megaphone, you would definitely hear me loud and clear. But over time, you're probably going to go deaf if I keep talking to you that way. And so with these GLP-1 drugs, very similarly, the beta cells in our body, all of these different cells can actually go deaf to too much overstimulation and too much signaling. And so you run the risk in the long term of really losing these important signaling pathways that will give you those responses that you're looking for. And so you might find you have to keep increasing your doses in order to get the same impact with GLP-1 and other drugs that are like that. Moreover, if you have patients or you're a person who doesn't really like to take small molecule drugs, you want to try to tackle things the natural way, the GLP-1 hormone, the microbiome intervention is going to be a great way to do that. So what we find is that this is all a long-winded way of saying, what we find is that some practitioners are using the natural microbiome intervention alongside the drugs. And I think 78% of practitioners that we surveyed were using the microbiome intervention to help taper people down off their GLP-1 drugs so that they wouldn't have such a dramatic rebound when they were removing the drug doses. So those are the primary ways we've been told practitioners are using them.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, I still practice, and I would say clinically, it's largely what I'm doing is pairing the two together when I find that a pharmaceutical is necessary to try to get the effect at the lowest dose, but also protect that digestive health aspect and try to minimize some of the side effects with the goal of, short-term use ideally. A couple more questions. Would you say that all, and I assume this would be type 2 diabetic patients, are definitely low in Akkermansia?
No, I wouldn't say that all of them are low in Akkermansia. I think there have been some really nice correlative studies that have been done globally showing that there is, pretty statistically significant reduction in people with type 2 diabetes when it comes to looking at their Akkermansia levels. But certainly there are people with type 2 diabetes that have perfectly fine levels of Akkermansia. And so again, the efficacy, I think as a practitioner, sort of thinking about the efficacy of these products is a pairing of the symptoms and the clinical state of the patient along with, you have a suspicion that they might be having a microbiome deficiency. And one of the clear things that we've definitely heard is that if you have a patient that has GI issues along with their metabolic issues, then there seems to, potentially a higher likelihood that there's a microbiome deficiency. So they might be a better candidate for this kind of intervention.
Yeah, excellent. Question, is the 500 million formulation available to providers?
Well, great question. It's actually only available to providers. We do not sell this anywhere else. This is also a Fullscript exclusive, and so you can only really get it through Fullscript and Pendulum.
Yeah, can you also tell? I mean, I think one of the really exciting things about the Pro line was the packaging, and I know we talked about that in a previous webinar, but maybe you could just come back to that to the listeners in terms of how you really develop very unique packaging for this Pro line as well.
Yes, I think that, when it comes to healthcare practitioners, that there's a real value in the quality of the product and the longevity of the product. And so, at Pendulum, we really wanted to invest in these things that might make much more of a difference to a practitioner than they would necessarily to a regular person who didn't have this knowledge. And so one of the most important things about these strains is that they are strict anaerobes. So when you're growing them, they can't be exposed to any oxygen. But once they are lyophilized and in powder form, they're actually quite stable, unless they get exposed to water. And that rehydration brings them back to life. And then they are once again really susceptible to oxygen, which is everywhere around us. And so they die. And so one of the tools to be able to reduce that chance of rehydration is to use desiccant packets, and we certainly do that with all of our products. But to really drive that home, you can also use bottles that are desiccant lined. So they're lined entirely with desiccant, and that really prevents for all the pills in there, not just the ones touching the desiccant packet, for all the pills in there to have a reduction in the water levels that are in the bottles. And so we've invested in that, and that is one of the key parts of the Pro line that enables them to have actually a higher viability.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you for everyone's attention. I just want to make sure the last slide does have the references that were discussed. So, if you want to go back to the webinar in the recording and look through those research papers, please feel free. We've listed those for your convenience. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, this partnership and having this Pro line inside of Fullscript is such a powerful combination. It was great to do the survey and be able to speak to that. So Colleen, thanks for your time. Amy, thanks for all your help and hosting.
Thank you, guys.
Excellent. So I just want to say thank you again so much to everyone who attended today. And obviously, thank you so much to Colleen Cutcliffe and also Jeff Glad for their presentations. Look out for an email with a link to view this recording, as well as a special offer from Pendulum within the next couple days. And anyone who has any additional questions can send them over to me at amy.regan@fullscript.com. And I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. See ya.
Thank you.